All right, welcome. My name is Matt. I am going to teach you in this video how to use Dungeondraft. Pretty powerful tool for making fairly fast maps for role-playing games. Dungeons and Dragons is what I use it typically for, but pretty much any game that requires a grid. Um, this is a really fast way of making maps. Without further ado, let's get started. When you first sort of download the program and open it up, this is what you're going to see. Right now, we're currently at version 1.0.0.0. Uh, for all intents and purposes, I'm fairly certain that this program is not going to be updated anymore. It's pretty much set, but everything's up in the air. Maybe it'll be updated. I will just mention as a sort of forewarning. This program is a little quirky. It's got a couple quirks to it, but I have found that it's just a very powerful tool regardless, and easy to use if you avoid maybe like a couple tools, which we'll go over. But hopefully that does not dissuade you from getting it. I find it sort of invaluable as a time-saving map making tool. First thing we're going to do is we're going to hit the new button to make a new map. We're going to make a map that is a width of 40 tiles, height of 40 tiles, or whatever you want. There are templates here if you're using a virtual tabletop, which I typically use, although we do it online. If you have a TV that's a certain sort of like number of inches, you could potentially use some of those. If you want to print it, you could use those. All the templates do is they change these numbers, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. You can start with a map wizard. It will give you a little bit of a rundown on how to use different tools and stuff like that. But I find it's not that big a deal. Edit asset pack selection. This is a good enough time, I guess, to talk about it. In this program, you get a certain number of sort of assets that you can use to kind of cut and paste, copy, like sort of like images of little tables, little chairs, little whatever. Basically, almost everything that you put in Dungeondraft is an asset of some form or shape, including the walls, the floors. You can download ones online. Several people have made map packs or I should say asset packs for Dungeondraft, and they're fairly easy to install. I will talk about how to install them at the end of the video if you're interested. I have a couple of my own that I have also made. So don't be too confused if my assets look slightly different than yours. But yeah, we're just going to hit OK, and it's going to make a map for us, loading in the assets that we've chosen. Right, so once your program is all loaded up, this is what you're going to see, sort of a blank map. What we want to learn first is how to get around the map. So if you ever forget any of the tools that you select, typically will have hotkeys associated with them. You will find them when you have selected that particular tool in the bottom left. When you have no tool selected, it will remind you how to kind of move around the map. You can hold the middle mouse button or like your scroll wheel. Sort of clicking that button will drag you or pan you around the map. You can also utilize the space key to do the same thing. You can hold control and then use that scroll wheel up and down to zoom in. You'll be doing this a lot, so getting comfortable doing that is kind of essential. Once you get the feel for that, we'll talk a little bit about some of the buttons down here and what they do and what they relate to. The first button is the grid tool, or I should say the grid sort of display. What that does is it displays this sort of grid. It's sort of self-explanatory. This little button is a little bit maybe less explanatory, self-explanatory, but if you watch my mouse, there is a little yellow indicator that sort of follows it around, and it seems to be snapping right now to sort of the center the four corners. That is because I have snap activated, snap on. Also, if you highlight any of these, there are hotkeys. So like the S is for toggling the snap, the G is for toggling grid. With snap off, you now see that that little yellow indicator is following my mouse a lot closer. It's not snapping to things. Typically, when we're making, I want to say like most man-made structures, for the most part, at least I find in my workflow when I'm building maps that the snap tool is typically on. I will toggle it off on occasion when doing certain things. So for now, we're going to leave it on. The lighting, you're not going to notice a big change until we add some lighting to a scene. But this will toggle that lighting sort of on and off for you. This particular tool is kind of, it sort of tells you like what coordinate you are on right now. Like this is the 0001. So the left coordinate is going to be your x-axis. The right coordinate is going to be your y-axis. I guess it's useful in some situations where you're like measuring things. I have found myself rarely using it. Another button you'll see here is it's not necessarily a button as much as it's a toggle for the map layers, I guess. Levels would be the word I'm looking for. We haven't added any additional levels to this particular Dungeondraft map, so this stuff's going to be grayed out and it's not going to do anything until we add some more. We may mess with that in a second. And by a second, I really mean like probably towards the end of the video. But suffice to say, this is useful when you're making maps that have multiple levels. Like if you have a large tower that you want to be fairly even and accurate instead of having to redraw it every single time on multiple maps. You can sort of compare the levels, you can copy paste levels. It's very handy and useful for those sorts of problems. Cool. The next thing we'll go over is your sort of top left. We have a bevy of options here. These are where all of the creative tools are going to be in these sort of sections over here. And we're going to go over each just briefly, very quickly. So the first one we are going to be going over is the design sort of tab. The design tab has a lot of different, very useful and often used tools. One of which I would strongly recommend not using. The building tool, just don't use it. It has a lot of bugs. It's a little messy and it's you're unable to sort of edit things as well with this particular tool. Other tools do the same thing the building tool does, better and easier to use and with less bugs. So just avoid the first tool here. This is sort of my one caveat for this program, is that it's got a few tools that are quirky and buggy. This particular tool is one of those sort of buggy, quirky tools. Just disregard it, pretend it doesn't exist. You can do all the same things with the wall tool and the pattern shape tool, and to much greater effect and easier and better. So the first one we'll talk about in earnest is the wall tool. The wall tool, as the name implies, builds you walls. I have several walls here that are part of sort of the base program. I have two that aren't, but we'll focus on the ones that sort of you would have access to if you were to have first purchased this product. So first and foremost, in order to use this tool, there's a sort of a sorting thing. You can go over and under. I'll explain what that means in a second. But the way you make anything here is you, and again, if you ever forget, it's going to be on this bottom section. Since we've selected the tool, typically it will tell you the hotkeys that are associated with that. We are just going to be left clicking a sort of square here, and once we have sort of completed it, you'll see that it turns green. If you click that, it will actually make the sort of building or the walls for you. This particular wall is like wood. You can alter the color of this wood by sort of moving this around down here. That will change the color of the wood. Here, for our next building, if you wanted to change the color of this wall that you've already placed, you'll need to go down to the select tool, click it, highlight the walls, and you'll see that the color here. Also, there's a hex if you ever are interested. There's also you can make a wall sort of semi-transparent with the A being, I don't know, but basically it's the opacity of the particular color. Um, but let's say we want like sort of a little bit of a darker color, something like that. Um, One thing I find useful is if I like this color and I want to sort of recreate it more than just the one that I've selected, I just copy the Control C, the hexadecimal. Here, there's a button here that will make things a little bit faster for you instead of having to try and find the tool that you were previously on. Every time you go to the Select tool, there is a button on the Select tool that allows you to go to whatever previous tool you were just using. If you click that, it will go back to the Wall tool instantly. You'll see that we've messed with the Wall tool, this particular one to be this weird green color. We can sort of click down here. Control V are the hex that we liked, that color, and so the rest of the walls will be this particular color. Another thing that you can adjust on most sort of objects in general, if I go back to the Select tool, you'll find yourself going to this tool quite often, is you'll notice that there is like a bit of a shadow that is going around this object, as well as you'll see them in many others. There is a toggleable sort of shadow button. If you don't like them, you can remove them. Sometimes it's useful to remove them in certain circumstances. So there is a toggle for that. We'll go back to the previous tool. You'll see that the shadow can be toggled here as well. But this is where this sort of over-under thing is going to start taking place. So if I want to make say this is a little room, I wanted to separate out a section of this room. This will tell, this is basically sorting. So if I make an additional wall and then I push enter to finish it, you'll see that it sort of tucks the ends of this particular wall that I've just created underneath the older one. It's because I have under selected. If I over selected, it will do the opposite. It will set it on top. I typically like to have it on under because most of the time I'm doing the outside layer and then I'm working inside, and I think it just looks a little bit nicer than having this kind of sticking out. If you there's a couple ways to edit like a mistake, like say I don't really like this wall, I want to delete it. You can hit the undo button. An alternative is Control Z. I will find this is one of the things that's a little buggy about the application, is that sometimes you have to hit Control Z several times for it to even take effect. So you can hit this undo button. Alternatively, you can go over to the Edit Points button. This will allow you, just as sort of like a nice aside, to edit any wall to however you like. You can add more nodes to it, several points. Perhaps I think that this square is too boring, right? For a room, maybe I want to add a little sort of node here. I want to move this out. I want to have like a bump out or something like that. So that's an easy way to do that. You do that with the edit points button. Another thing you can do is if you highlight any of these just by sort of mousing over it, if you hit the delete key, you can sort of slowly delete what you've made. And when you hit that second to last one, it sort of disappears altogether. Another way you can delete a wall, say I don't like this wall, is you can go to the select tool, highlight it, highlight any sort of object or thing that you want to delete. You'll know that it's highlighted because it will have sort of a little yellow line that shows up, and just left click it. So it's highlighted. You'll see this will pop up. That's how you know you have it like properly highlighted. You can either hit this button, the delete button, or you can actually just hit the delete key and that will do the same thing. And we can always hit that previous tool button to be back at the tool that we were previously using. So that's the wall tool. Another tool that is sort of directly maybe subsidiary to the wall tool is the portal tool. Portal tool is the way you make sort of windows, doors, those sorts of things in walls, or even you can apply them sort of self-standing or freestanding as well. The way you do that is very simple. Usually you need to have sort of wall set up. There are some caveats to this tool, which I will explain. In order to explain those caveats, I will need to turn off the snap for a moment. And let's build a sort of unusual wall. If you ever find that you are like on a wall tool and you're like, hey, I can't make a wall, it's probably because you have the edit selected. So let's make an unusual looking wall for a second. Um, and this will help me sort of go over or illustrate a point. This is another little quirk of the program that you should be aware of. So we have several doors. The doors, I'm going to apply snap back. Um, Here's another, actually, this is a great example of a third quirk that this program has. Um, so first and foremost, you'll notice that you can see that the door is being highlighted. It's snapping to place. You can turn the snap off and kind of put a door in like a weird spot, like right here, sort of in between two cubes, for instance. I typically usually like to, since these are battle maps, tokens are typically going to fill up a whole square. I'll usually have them kind of centered, but just want to give you all the options. There's several sort of types of doors. Let's say you don't like the position of this door. This door is sort of like it's not uniform on both sides. Maybe you want the little bump outs to be on sort of this side of the wall. What you can do is you can click this button right here, rotate 180. If you have that applied, it will rotate whatever sort of portal thing you have up. So that's how you do that. You can turn it off to get the opposite. There's like portcullises and all kinds of things. So far we've been using block light anchored. Block light is not too important aside from the fact that when we go into sort of light settings, it will mess with that, but I wouldn't worry about that right now. Anchored, freestanding, these are the two options that you have. Freestanding is if you don't want to have one of these like doors or windows attached to an actual like wall tool, like wall segment. You can click freestanding and you will be able to make a wall that is like kind of, or a portal or a door that is freestanding. This is kind of like the only way to add a door to a really weird wall. You'll see that it's actually sort of slapping it behind this particular wall, which is like a little maybe not useful depending on what you're trying to do. And there's not really any way to make this sort of go to the front. So yeah, with weird shaped walls, you're going to find that the portal tool is going to be a little bit tougher to use. You just have to kind of plan ahead a little bit, because even if we have um, an anchored sort of portal tool selected, like there's very few sections where we can really put put an actual like door in like a proper spot. So something to just consider. It's just the way it's like programmed, I guess. I never end up finding myself building walls like this unless they are like cavern walls or something like that. And so typically cavern walls don't have like doors slapped on them. And if they do, there's ways around it. And we'll maybe talk about that when we get to some of the other tools. But so that's the portal tool. Another sort of weird quirk, you'll see that um, so I remember when I edited this wall, right, and I bumped it out, you'll see that I'm having a hard time selecting this particular section to like to put, and yet it thinks that there's a wall here, and it does some weird stuff. So this is another quirk about the program. If you ever have this problem, and you may have it, in the future at some point, there's an easy way to fix it. All you have to do is you have to save the program. So you have several Icewind Dale stuff. It's kind of what I'm working on right now. We'll call this intro. I don't know. We'll save it for now. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to close the program and we're going to load it back up. And alternatively, you can actually just open a new map and then open the map that you were just on. I think it was this one. Yeah. And you will find that the problem sort of fixes itself. I'm sure it's some kind of bug, and I don't expect it to ever be fixed because this program is kind of like set. So something to be aware of. It's not like a deal breaker for me. I find this tool's pros outweigh its cons heavily. But that is something to just kind of keep in mind. I've come across that bug like a few times, and it's never really been fixed. If you just want an open door, there's that. I think this is one of the new ones. It's a crumbled wall. You can mess with this all you want. There is just sort of like an empty one if you wanted to kind of like open up a space. Um, these particular tools, the portal tool, the wall tool, they work best with sort of straightish lines. So just keep that in mind. So that is the wall tool and the portal tool. And then we'll go to the cave brush tool. Cave brush tool is an interesting tool. It can do a lot of things. It can make caves, which is always fun. It is a sort of like paint style tool where you just sort of paint a certain shape with a brush, and it will create sort of a cutaway of a cave for you. If you hold the Alt key, you can see right here, it's sort of like an erase function. You can make like little cavern pillars and things like that, which is interesting. Another thing that you can do is you can blast open a section of the cave to sort of like have it, have an opening. So that's something you can do. Show blast open area will show you the area that you have sort of have this brush mode activated and you've painted. So that's the only place I've painted on that area. It helps sometimes when you're trying to like maybe get like an exact like amount of this wall kind of like missing. So those are the two different options, the show blast area. The only other thing you can do is you can change the color of the floor, the cave floor, as well as the cavern walls. By doing this, hitting a little plus key and then like just adjusting it. And it can be basically whatever color you want. You can also adjust the opacity of the walls or the floor as well. And from time to time, I've found that to be useful. So that's pretty much the whole cave tool, or cave brush tool. One of the sort of the second, maybe most important tool that I use on a regular basis is the pattern shape tool. And this basically makes like floor tiles, essentially. It can make a lot of things. You can actually like draw little stuff with it as well. I have a lot of sort of separate ones that I've downloaded that look really like nice. Some of them are a little too like high definition compared to the sort of art of the base program, so I don't typically use them that often, but it's there. There's a couple interesting tile sets that come with the base set. I'll leave them for you to discover. They all have sort of interesting things they can do, but basically you can make floors with these, which is really handy for making, buildings and such. There are three different ways to make flooring, I guess. You have the square. Circle will make a sort of a circular shaped floor. You can always remember you can turn off the snap to get like maybe a little bit more accurate or specific kind of shapes. And then there's this tool that I use probably the most, which is kind of like a build it yourself like lasso tool style setup, and it's essentially the same thing as the wall tool, and it's very useful. You can also edit the points that you've done. You can delete points with the delete key. You can also hit the backspace key, I think, to delete, yeah, as well. You can make new ones just by clicking anywhere on the sort of not node area, but like anywhere outside of that. If you want a little bit of a like more precise setup, if you can turn off snap to have something like some very specific shape in mind, and you can get pretty detailed with it, I guess. At any time, if you want, I think I've gone over this, but anytime you want to delete a like a floor tile, if you go down to the select tool, if you just highlight it, you can edit it. You can also just delete it. One other thing I will talk about that you can do with these tools as well as many others is this layer, this sort of layer setup. This is super useful for a lot of reasons. First and foremost, if you have let's say you have this is let's clean this up a little bit. So let's say we're making some kind of a room. This is going to be some kind of like, I don't know, tavern or something. Um, what we want is we want like maybe like a little side area here to be a different, maybe like this one. We want it to look different. Um, and it's going to be like a little like platform area. So it automatically puts it on top, which is nice. But technically both this bottom layer with like the wood, like I can't even highlight the other one because they're on the same layer, which is kind of annoying if you're trying to adjust things. Like I have to physically move this over to click this, which is never like ideal. What you can do is you can do several things. You can send this one to back. That doesn't do much when they're on the same layer. Bring it to front, send it back. It will just change where it is. Um, what you can also do is you can make it lower, put it on a lower layer than this one. So you'll be able to highlight that one. You typically, I like to have sort of a base layer, one being kind of like the minimum, and then work my way up from there. This particular one, I would maybe slap on layer two. So the layer sort of setup is the same on like a lot of different tools, and they are all kind of intertwined with one another. So you can have a lot of things on user layer one. If I have like a pattern on user layer two, for instance, let me check to make sure that this is just accurate. So this is on user layer two. If I grab an object that's on user layer one, you'll see that it does sort of go underneath the second layer, because right now the objects is on this first layer. If I hit layer two, I think it prioritizes objects over the base floor. But something to keep in mind, and it's useful for a lot of different reasons. So that's this particular tool. You can edit it just like you edit anything else. I can give it some, kind of like expand this out so it actually fits. If I wanted to, I could even adjust the one on the bottom to sort of be like kind of kitty corner to this one. You'll notice that I'm trying to highlight the one on the bottom, but the one on the top is sort of always automatically going to be selected. You can't really help that. You just kind of have to scooch it out of the way for a minute and adjust things kind of in that way. Whatever's on top is typically going to be the thing that the program decides you want to play with. So something to keep in mind, like for instance, I have this sort of node and this sort of node. When they're kissing, when they're touching each other, it will only highlight the top layer regardless of where you put sort of, like if I was to do that, it doesn't do anything. This doesn't do anything. It has nothing to do with which one it automatically selects. There's no way to kind of like go up and down. You just have to scooch it out of the way, move something, and then scooch it back. So another little quirk to keep in mind when building things with these different tools. Okay, so we've gone over the pattern shape tool. We've gone over the wall tool. We've built some doors for our little kind of room. I do want to adjust this color. It's kind of like, I don't know, bright. Let's adjust the color a little bit, sure. And now what are we going to do? Well, the world itself right now is fairly brown, which is fine if we lived in a mud world, but I think we're going to go to our next tool. We're going to skip the roof tool for now. Basically, all it does is it makes roofs. It's a very simple kind of, like, you don't have a lot of sort of say in how it works and functions. It just makes roofs for you. It's useful. From time to time you can adjust hip, gable, dormer. You can mess with that. I will leave it for you all to discover on your own. But yeah, let's go to the next one. So terrain. The terrain brush is what affects sort of everything that's not an asset. I guess technically the terrain is also an asset, but basically the way it works is you paint. You paint these sort of different layers onto the background. Right now, there's different like biomes and stuff you can click. All of this does is it just changes like your sort of palette that you can select from. I'm gonna have a larger palette than you are. The base game I think has a lot of these. Some of these I've like downloaded, but essentially, let's maybe start terrain moss. So there's that one. There's grass. I like to start with moss. Throw a little bit of dirt. And that's kind of like the basis of any sort of, I don't know, idyllic like standard town. And so the way this tool works is just like the cavern tool. You can raise and lower the brush size with your scroll wheel, just as it implies on the bottom here, as well as you can adjust it with this slider. And if you hold the button down, it just sort of starts to kind of like paint slowly but surely creeping up. The intensity slider is what changes how fast you paint. So I have the intensity slider super low. Basically, nothing's happening. If you raise it up a little bit, it goes a little bit slower. You raise it to the max, it paints the quickest. But it's always got like a little bit of this like creeping quality to it. Which can be kind of nice. It seems a little weird at first, but if you kind of go back and forth and just like tap your left mouse button, you can get some kind of maybe a little bit more naturalistic effects out of this tool than you would expect. Instead of just having like really sharp lines like this, which is sometimes fine. But I've found a lot of times, at least in real life, when it comes to at least dirt and grass, they tend to not have super sharp lines. And so you can mess with this all you want. I'm not going to mess with it too much. I just want to kind of show you how it works. So that's how it works. You can make, say you don't like the color of this dirt, you can adjust it to sort of different styles. It could be just dry grass, whatever you want. These are all adjustable. You can unlock more slots if you've used, so each of these sort of take up, I guess, a slot. Let's say terrain rocky. I think this one's in the base game, right? Or I keep calling it a game. I think this is in the base program. But let's say you want like a little cobblestone pathway going, I don't know, some direction. So far we've used 3 out of the 4 kind of like terrain brush setting like slots. But you can add a lot more. It kind of depends on how nice your PC is and how kind of complicated you want to make it. I've never found myself, I've very rarely found myself using more than 4. But if you want to use more than 4, you can. There's also a fill tool, which will just fill the entire world with whatever you've selected. Less useful, but there it is. Water brush is the next tool in this particular sort of tool subset. The water brush is interesting. If you find yourself using a virtual tabletop and are actually playing like with this program open, I think there's a way to do it where you don't have to see any of this stuff. I've never done it, so I don't know exactly how it works, but you can see it's actually slightly animated. It like bubbles around a little bit. It's just kind of cool more than anything. But just like any of the other tools, you can change the shape. With this particular tool, it's slightly different in that I'm going to turn off snap for this because it's a little bit of a more organic sort of thing. This is kind of like the cave tool, in that you can hold the the erase button, the alt button down. You can clip out portions like this. You can add portions like this. With this particular tool, you can also just kind of paint it on, and that sometimes makes it look a little more natural. And you could have a little island in the middle, whatever you want. So that's that particular tool. You can change the color of the shallows, of the deeper colors, to all kinds of weird colors. And as soon as you adjust it, it will sort of update for you. It looks kind of weird. So yeah, that's that particular tool. We're gonna go over like the next couple pretty quickly, or at least these two, I guess. The material brush tool is a unique tool that I very rarely use, but it's something that is there and for you to use. So there's different sort of paintable options. This is like grain or like gold or something. This is like bushes. I will say the larger and the more, this is another little quirk of the program, but the more you paint these, if you paint them a lot, like a huge swath of it, if your computer is maybe a little bit older, you'll find it begins to chug a bit. All of these are kind of CPU intensive for whatever reason. I tend to not use these. You need to select the material that you have sort of painted in order to erase it. Um, this is a less useful tool overall, but from time to time you may find that it is useful. Uh, it is naturally on the lowest layer, but you can adjust that. You can put it on layer 1, so now it's above water. You can put it, this is sort of like the below water layer, wherever you like, and that's how that particular tool works. Useful from time to time. I tend to not use it. I use the ice one sometimes, but that's pretty much the only one that I end up using. Okay, so the path tool is a very powerful tool I use all the time. There's a million different paths. A lot of these I've downloaded, like all of these sort of just straight lines. That was in a sort of a particular pack. Same with these sort of like different effect ones. I'm doing an Icewind Dale campaign, so there's a lot of sort of snow stuff that I've been working with. But this particular tool is very useful, and I use it a lot. Let me explain how it works. So just like many of the other tools in this particular subsection, the wall tool, the pattern shape tool, the path tool works sort of very similarly. And the way it works is you grab a path, for instance, a cliff. We are on user layer 1. You can, adjust that. If you so wish, it's sorting for over. I'm going to hit it with the under. And so you'll see it goes under this particular section that we've done. If I hit over, you'll see it's still under. The reason is because it's really going over and under itself, essentially other paths. You can adjust the user layer to be above. I think you have to have it above walls in order for it to go over a cavern. At any rate, I digress. We're going to stick with user layer 1 for now. But as you saw I just did, you can essentially just left click and you can make a wrapping of a cliffside. And when you're finished, you hit the enter key. So that's one way to do it. It has a few sort of settings and options that you can adjust. The width, for instance, you can adjust this and we'll make a larger cliff. You can make it smaller, we'll make it a tiny cliff. That is one of the things that you can adjust. You can just hit the sort of enter key. I'm just going to delete that real quick. And another thing you can sort of adjust is the smoothness. This would be the transition when you sort of like move like left to right. These are really sharp transitions. If you turn up the smoothness, the transition will be a little bit more kind of like rounded. So that's the difference between those two settings. And then there's your transition. Right now we have transition none. What that means is that at the beginning of making this particular path, it's flat. At the end, it's flat. So you can do that. Like it's useful with these sorts of things where like, a railroad track would like end, for instance. With a cliff, however, it's like a little bit, maybe looks a little weird. So that's where these sort of transitions come into play. And there's a transition in, and what that means is that wherever you start it is where the transition will begin. So there's a fade. You can fade both ways, in and out. So there's a little bit of a kind of a fade effect. There is a grow effect and a shrink effect as well, and this will make your cave, or I should say your cliff sort of squeeze in, and when you adjust it, you can see that it does kind of like automatically adjust the thickness, judging sort of depending on where the last node is kind of how it decides. So if the last node is very far away, it will pinch quite a bit. If it's very close, it will expand a bit more. And you can kind of adjust this to make it look a little bit more natural. If you're doing like a sort of a cliff face, it will, at least for this particular sort of cliff path, it will kind of noodle it a little bit. but I will tell you from experience, when your your players, if you're playing like D&D for instance, are taking up a full sort of square, you'll find that when you actually go to sort of export this file, it looks quite a bit smoother than it actually does. It's a little bit less noticeable. I use this tool constantly. There's a million different sort of like very useful and interesting options. Um, you can like this one is kind of like a walkway, so it's weird to kind of pinch them, but it makes for a weird effect, a unique effect. Probably with this one, you would have it set to none and kind of like um, finish it off at like a spot where it would look a little bit more natural. But yeah, that's how this particular tool works. They have ropes. They have this one is like I think it's a yeah wooden fence. The other thing is if you sort of finish, you can complete. They'll kiss, and they will sort of connect. So that's something that you can do. Um, and let's say you wanted a fence. This is a good sort of reason that you may want the smoothness to be 0, right? So not all fences are kind of like all cattywampus like that. A lot of fences are fairly straight. So this would be a good reason to use smoothness of 0. If you want like perfectly straight, this is just a little hot tip. If you want a perfectly straight sort of path, if you click right before kind of like we get to the end, click again and then click. So you basically made 3 nodes here. It will be really sharp because you give the program no time to kind of like adjust for the smoothness at all, and that's a good way to do it. And you can make some pretty sharp stuff. Editing, you can edit these just like you edit anything else. I think I explained that already. Just with this edit thing. Right, so that's the path tool. It's very powerful, very useful tool to utilize. Let's say real quick, I'll just highlight all these and delete them. We'll hit that previous tool button and let's go back to. So I've made some of my own. I've made actually basically just copies of the I gotta turn smooth this up. I'm just going crazy of the cliff in sort of different colors, and I'm going to use this one, or maybe I'll use this one to kind of connect. It's like right now our cave is not really a cave; it looks more like a pit. I am going to try and make this look a little bit better. So here's what we'll do: we'll have this kind of going off in this direction. We want to have it go under. We want to change the transition to grow. And we want to put this underneath like so to give it a little bit more volume, finish it off there. And then we'll do this side. So I want the lighter bit to be on top. So that means I need to start on the left. So what we'll do is this. Oop, that's not going to do it. Let's do this. And I'm just doing this really quickly, but to give you a brief idea on how fast you can make some, somewhat interesting maps, I can even maybe make a little ridge here, and we'll just finish it off there. So then maybe we'll go up to the terrain brushes, which we used before. Let's make all this like dry grass, for instance, up top. To give it a little bit more like a verticality, or maybe feel like this is like maybe a little bit of a cliff, and or like a bluff or something, and a little bit less like it's just more flat. And then we'll add terrain rocky to this one, and maybe we will even go to the wall tool. Nope, we'll go to the path tool again. We'll make an additional one here. Something like that. We'll do a another thing you can do is like a transition. We'll do like a grow, shrink. maybe like here. I'm gonna edit the points on that one. I'm gonna pull this over a little bit. So it's a bit of like a walk up. Um, cool. So now this is sort of a cutaway of the inside of this little bluff, and there's like a little cave here. Um, so this is all well and good. We've got a weird little pond here. We've got a little house without anything in it, and we've got a little bit of kind of like background stuff going on. Let's put it all together with a few things. First and foremost, objects. So, objects, they're your bread and butter of sort of building maps. They can do a lot for you. And right now, like for instance, we don't have any furniture or anything. So the object tool, it's got a million objects, so many objects. I've even sort of built some of my own. I mean, these are all ones that I drew myself. These are some that I've downloaded. These are some more that I've downloaded. And several of these come in the base game. You could throw like trees and stuff. Um, but you know, digging through this giant list is a little bit of a pain. So a easy way to kind of find things that you're looking for is to use this section right here. Most of the, I mean, every single one of the base objects in the game, in Dungeondraft, not the game, are tagged. And the tags allow you to kind of sort through them. I've got a few, like these are tags of sort of things that I've downloaded. Let's say we wanted some containers. So what that does is that tags a few things for you. Tags storage, it tags crate, it tags barrel. And you'll see all of the sort of crate, barrel, storage stuff on the right side. Some of these, I think most of these are going to be in the base set. But let's say we want maybe a little bookshelf over here. And we'll just plonk it there. Maybe we want a couple of like boxes. Another thing is I will mention that you can do is you can adjust the scale of any object. If you got, you know, sort of upscale a little too much, it looks a little wonky. But usually around like 1 to 1.5 you can do. Right click will fully rotate it. You can also rotate it with the scroll wheel. You can also do that with this little rotation thing here. We'll plonk one there. Another thing you can do that I will mention, and this, again, if you ever forget, all of this information that I'm about to go over is literally on the bottom sort of left of your screen. Anytime you click a different tool, it will sort of change the hotkey sort of options for you. But let's say like I want a barrel, but I want it to be sort of in between 7 and 8. This is too much of a rotation for me. If I hold the Z key, it will sort of reduce that increment by a little bit. So it's a little bit more like minute instead of like a larger jump. It's a little bit of a smaller jump. Another thing you can do is you can hold the A key that will mirror the object. This particular object is kind of the same on both sides, but this object, for instance, can be mirrored. Another thing you'll notice is that a lot of these particular objects have like this red color on them. Usually that means that you can adjust the color by using these little sort of auto setup ones, or you can hit this button and pick whatever color you want. You'll see that the color has changed over here as well on a lot of these sort of the objects that can be, the color can be changed. Some objects can't, will not have that color change sort of option. For instance, this broken plate is always going to be this color regardless of if you change it. Another thing to mention is just like with the walls and with many other things, you can add or remove that shadow. Sometimes I find with very small objects, especially when I place them on top of other objects, they just look a little bit better without that heavy shadow on there, so I will like adjust it. Also, if you are stacking a lot of objects on top of each other, you'll see that the shadows quickly become a little muddy. So that's something to kind of consider. But these are all things that you will probably kind of learn and come across as you work on this program. But there's a lot of different sort of tags and options that you can pick. And I find that this is maybe the easiest way to do it. If you have like, for instance, say I really want like a bar, right? You're not sure where bar is. Fastest way to do it would be to use the search function. Type in bar, hit enter. Um, you can have a fuzzy or exact. I recommend leaving it on fuzzy because it will give you the most options. Typically, there's not too many options to pick from as it is. This is a good bar. We're gonna sort of slap that. Maybe I don't know, a little oversized, like right there. Um, maybe throw a little. Maybe there's a little reading nook over here. We got a spot for a. Here's one thing that I will mention. Like you see that's underneath. It's because remember we put that on the second layer. So we'll go to second layer. Let's change the color to I don't know this color or something. Put that there. Actually, maybe this one instead. Uh, we'll do maybe like a barrel. We'll throw some barrels, I don't know, over here. Water trough for animals. You can add a little, maybe a little book over here or something. Uh, Type in table. You'll come up with like several little tables. Can maybe add a couple tables. Maybe we can add some chairs. Usually they even have like busted up chairs, maybe from like a bar fight. Couple little sort of table chairs situation happening there. Maybe we want a bed for that little room. Type in bed. We'll just plonk that there. Maybe we want a side table for the bed, like kind of a nightstand. Maybe we want some candles to go onto that nightstand, as well as the sort of the different little tables here. Maybe we want a candelabra, kind of like over here, maybe on the bar. Maybe we want some bottles. Several of these are ones that I've made, but these are the ones that come. It's kind of standard. You can change the color. Let's make them. Let's make them red. Maybe there's a couple bottles of red, a couple bottles of white wine over here. Let's do another barrel. Maybe there's a latrine. Maybe it'll be in the back. Nobody wants to see that. We'll delete this one and go to our previous tool. We'll hit enter for barrel again. Let's do, I don't know, this one. Let's do this one. So one thing is we're still in user layer 2. Let's go to user layer 1, hit under, and we can put these under the bar, which can be handy. Cool. So now we have like maybe a little, just a tiny little random bar with like a little side room. Cute, great. So now that's kind of the object tool. There's a scatter tool as well. Scatter tool is very useful when you want to make the multiples of like one thing. So for instance, if I just wanted a ton of barrels, I can hold the button down and make a million barrels. And you can adjust the scatter tool a million different ways. You can adjust the scale, you can adjust the spread, like how much basically it spreads so like this line is about that big. If the spread is bigger, the line will be wider. If the spread is smaller, it'll make a million barrels kind of like lined up. Barrels obviously aren't going to be maybe the ideal for this. It may be like leaves, or even like trees or something like that. But like these little sprouts, you can make little sprouts and such. If you're going to do it like this, I'd recommend maybe turning off the shadow. But if we turn the spread up a little bit, maybe down a little bit, that's too much. It's okay. Let's go to like 1. No, 0.1. Okay. You can also use the scroll wheel to kind of adjust it a little bit closer. Cool. We're gonna delete all this stuff. Go to our previous tool. Another thing you can adjust with this is the rotation angle. So right now it will rotate between, it's sort of like a random, pseudo-random, like it'll rotate between 180 degrees to 180 degrees. You can adjust that however you see fit. You can also adjust the scale to make things bigger and smaller. Um, I find these useful in certain situations. A lot of times I just want to keep it maybe like a one-to-one. For a lot of things. But there are sort of uses for all of these if you're creative enough. Um, so leaves is one. There's also, let's go to maybe like tree. There's these like bushes that you can sort of make interesting little kind of like bush setups. Um, Another thing you can do is like you see me clicking kind of like one at a time. If you hold the shift key, um, you can actually click several. Same with the control, you can kind of like pick out specific ones. So say I want this whole set. So now when I'm using this scatter tool, it will use every single, like basically pick one of these at random for the set. And so you can quickly kind of make like a little sort of blobby kind of grasslandy area. You can also just like single click, single click, single click to kind of be a little bit more precise with it. You can adjust the spread, the scale rotation. Anyway, it is a very useful tool for making like very quick brush. Um, Also rocks. If you type in boulder, you're gonna actually find the rocks. All of these rocks are useful. I'm just gonna do this. Um, to make like a little kind of like rock garden, maybe not necessarily rock garden, but like just several rocks. And doing this is just so fast, so quick, and you can make things look pretty natural in just seconds. So very handy. Will save you a bit of time in prep. I really like it, and if you want to adjust, I mean, all this stuff is adjustable. So it's really nice. You can make things fairly quickly. So those are the maybe the two main tools that you're going to end up using. The object, the scatter tool, you're going to be using those a lot. So yeah, I would recommend definitely playing with it, getting used to it, because they're powerful tools. And yeah, so the next thing we'll go over is the lighting. So lighting for Dungeon Draft is useful in a lot of different ways. Ambient lighting. Uh, and the light tool. So these are the two options that you have. Ambient light is the light in the setting. So you can, I would recommend keeping it in the sort of blue range. Um, Blues tend to be good for maybe like a darker shade. Um, with ambient lighting, if you want to make like a darker scene, keeping the ambient light low, a little bit maybe towards the bluish side, and then adding these little lights. So there's different types of lights you can add. The light that's kind of like a little more cartoonish. You have kind of like a fade in light, and you have a little bit of a lighter sort of color. This one's more like a pin light. Pin lights work great for candles, for instance. You can adjust the intensity. It can be very strong, very powerful light. It can be a very weak, like barely there light. I really like using the very weak, barely there lights to emphasize height. So like if this area is particularly higher than the other, that's a way to do it. You can also sort of emphasize, for instance, like a path without having to add sort of like a side, like actual, I guess, light sources, but it kind of like highlights certain areas. Um, and I think it looks kind of nice. Adds just one extra layer of dimensionality to a map very quickly. Um, It also is nice if you just want to make like one particular room like just sort of naturally a little bit brighter. So like those two little lights are there, but I haven't actually added like a light to it. So that's nice. For that, let's add some little maybe like pin candle lights here. Doop, doop. Put one over here. Maybe one in here. It's a little bit darker, and you have a little bit of like a night setting. You could even add one thing I will just mention is you notice that I'm sure you do notice, I should say, that the walls are being affected. They are affecting the light. You can always adjust it by turning shadows off. This will make it so your lights are going straight through walls, regardless of sort of where they are, and through doors. Um, Widgets. This button just tells you like kind of like where your light is affecting, where each of these lights sort of range is. I rarely use it, but it's there. You can adjust the color of the light. You can have a cooler light that's blue. You can have a weird green light. You can have pretty much any color light you want. You can have a weird purple light. Um, it's like a raven here or something, or like there's spells going off. So there's a lot of different neat things you can do with light, and really the sky is the limit. But yeah, that's lighting. That's the ambient light. I would recommend. So one of the things that this is another little kind of like side, not a glitch, but it's like a just a quirk of the system. If you save this program, save this map that you've made, right? And you want to adjust the ambient light later, perhaps, you will find that the hex has like this ambient light will just be white. It will forget. It will forget where it's at. It will still look the same on the map, but you won't know. You won't be able to get that exact color unless you like write this down or something. It's kind of annoying. I totally agree and admit that. But if you don't want to ever change the ambient light, I would just leave it. But if you need this exact lighting for whatever reason, maybe you want to put it on a different map or something, just write the hex down. They're not typically that long, so you can slap it in there when like if need be, if the need arises. Last couple of things we'll go over is the sort of map settings. Map settings are cool. You can do a lot of cool things with them. Grid color is kind of useful. You'll see that the grid is somewhat prevalent on the map right now. You can make it a little bit less prevalent. I like to have my grid color typically on this level. You can, if it's a very dark map, you can change it to like a light grid. You can change it to a really light grid. You can change it to really any color. You can even change the color to red if you wanted. Don't know why you would, but hey, you can do it. I tend to like it right around here. It's like it's minute. It's sort of out of the way, but it still emphasizes where you can put your sort of players and characters and where they can move and stuff like that. Another thing that you can adjust is the camera filter. There's only two. There's a printer-friendly version, which basically makes everything black and white. There's also sepia, which gives this weird like vignette kind of grain onto the map. I seldom and rarely use those. The sort of another sort of interesting thing that you can do. There's a couple. There's trace image, which is really useful if you are making maps from like a reference or from like a like official D&D map or whatever, and you want to make like a Dungeondraft version. It's very easy to use that tool. We'll go over that in a second. And then there's level settings. Level settings is very useful. Let's say that there was a second story to this building, right? So the way we would make a second story to this building, we'll probably need to make like a staircase or something. Let's pretend there's a staircase there for now. But right now we're on the ground level. So we want to create a new level. Our new level, we're going to clone the ground level. That's somewhat important. And the new level, we're going to call it second story. And it's going to switch to that level on creation. So now we have two levels, and it doesn't seem like it because both of our levels are the same. But if we push these buttons up and down, you'll see that we're in the second story. This is sort of on the ground. So on the second story, none of this stuff's going to be there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight all the inside stuff and just start like deleting it slowly. We're going to delete all this. And we are even going to delete that. Going to delete that. And I think it will become more plain that we're on the second story now that we have a ground, and then now we have a second story. The second story also, I'm probably going to want to, this is just my personal preference, but I like it when the map is sort of like a different color, so it makes it feel like you're going up a level. I'm going to adjust the light And the ambient light for this level is going to be different than the ambient light for any other level. So if you go up and down, the ambient lights are like they change. They're independent of one another. So that's something to consider. So the second story, let's make really quickly a pattern. Let's make it this one. Let's do this. Turn snap on. Pop, 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 and pop. So it's maybe like a busted up. Let's delete these because you're not going to be able to access on this top layer. You're not going to be able to access the doors going in and out. So this is like the lower level, and then you can go up to like the attic. Cool. So we're going to change the color as well, maybe to like something like that. All right. So now we have kind of like a sort of little upstairs area. I won't. I'm not gonna add anything to it. I mean, I don't know. We'll add a random map. We'll add some papers or something. Doesn't really matter. We'll add a fish. Who cares? So that is sort of like a showcase of sort of two different layers. Now that we have done that, we'll go to trace image. So the trace image is a really unique and useful tool for tracing images. You basically so the way this tool works is you can browse a file, any sort of like JPEG, PNG should work, and it will sort of slap that into the image. You can adjust the scale of that image as well as the opacity, and you can kind of trace over it. It's very useful for like if you found a map online and you want to maybe adjust or change something about it, you can sort of recreate it in Dungeondraft fairly quickly. But the last thing I will say, there is a text tool. I rarely use it. Text tool. It essentially makes text. There's a text box button where you can adjust. So like if you were making a town, for instance, maybe it's like Baldershire. You could do something like that. I so rarely use the text tool that I don't even have a lot to say about it. But you can kind of add like maybe a little maybe this is Baldershire Manor or something like that. So you can add that. You can put it on the bottom. You can make the basically everything sort of self-explanatory. You can make the border width of like if I click edit, uh, the border width thicker. You can make it thinner. You can make the sort of text box shape around it or square. You can change the font color, the font size, what type of font it is. They don't have like a million different kinds, but they got a couple interesting ones. Um, and it's visible, invisible. You can delete it. I almost never use this tool because typically, at least with my workflow, I build the maps here. I usually edit them, like I do that kind of stuff, like with words and all that kind of just sort of information. I will add that in the virtual tabletop that I'm using, usually is Foundry. But that's that tool, just very quickly. There's also a tool called Prefabs. This is a somewhat interesting tool, a little bit unique in that you can essentially take um, a set of like individual um, uh, assets and turn them into a single object. So like I built this sort of bench looking thing out of sort of several planks of wood and like different things that you can find within the object tool set. So let's say, for instance, I wanted to build, I don't know, a little cart. Let's actually turn off the shadow for this real quick. Maybe like pop, pop, and then pop, pop. I don't know, um, put this on the bottom. And then maybe grab something like this. Let's put that in front. maybe like um, actually let's do it like this, and then I think what I want to do is put this under, turn the shadow on to give this thing a shadow. Bop and bop. Let's give it like maybe handles. Let's just use these for wheels. So we'll do like bop. Uh, cool. So let's say I've made like a weird little cart, right? Um, Now that I have this weird little cart, maybe I want to turn it into like a prefab like this. Meaning that it will sort of like group everything together. You'll be able to move it, edit it as a unit. You just need to highlight everything that is within the sort of prefabricated thing. Just hit the Make Prefab button. You can set the default to default. You can add sort of different sets. Like if you want this to be like, I don't know, construction or like machinery or whatever, you can make a little sort of subfolder for it. Let's just call this cart thing because I think I already have a cart. And so now, if you ever, this thing is a prefab now. So when I highlight it, it'll highlight the whole set, and you can adjust it as is. You can separate it, which now you'll be able to sort of cut it into pieces. If you ever want the prefab again, this is kind of what prefabs are useful for. You can go to your prefabs setting, and you will find your cart thing right here, and you'll be able to click it, and you can copy it a million times, and you'll never have to build that cart again. You only have to do it once. So some of the prefabs I've made are like this is another type of cart. There's like a cage. I got fire pit. Got a ballista. This was specific for something unrelated, but it was like a purple ballista. Um, and then just like a lot of different things, like hives. Um, there's hives for like bees. This crazy battle wagon thing that I made. Anyway, you can so like I will never again need to make like a crazy battle wagon thing. It will forever be made. So prefabs are very useful. Last but not least, let's go over exporting. Exporting is very simple. You just hit the export button. You can choose to have the grid or lighting on or off. You can change the type of export. Universal Virtual Tabletop is going to work best if you're using a virtual tabletop. Um, if you're using a program like, even though Foundry is a virtual tabletop, I'd recommend keeping it on PNG or JPEG. One of the things you can do with your program is, or rather with the export, is something to consider, I guess I should say, is the size, the file size of the image that you are going to be kind of like producing. If you are streaming, so for me, for my workflow, I use Foundry Virtual Tabletop, and with that, I stream the game to my players. Meaning that the larger the file size, the more likely it is that it will take a long time to load, things like that. So I'm very cognizant of size. So in presets, you can have best quality if you're printing it or something like that. This is going to be a huge file. I would not recommend it. I would recommend to optimal halved at the very least. Then you're going to want to export it. And it's going to show in folder. You're going to name your export. Let's call it intro. And it's going to kind of do some business. And in a hot minute, it will finish knocking out this image. And you can see it's 8 megabytes, which may not seem like a lot, but I like typically to have my maps be like 2 megabytes at most. And so what I will do in my for myself, me personally, this is the image that is sort of like prints out. It's a pretty high quality image, even though this was like halved, like the optimal whatever setting. So like this is more than enough to work for me. But what I'll do is I'll throw this in Photoshop and reduce the file size even more. But that's essentially exporting. It's a very simple kind of process. You see some of the other stuff that I've like done for the campaign that we're currently running, the Icewind Dale campaign. A lot of Icewind Dale stuff, a lot of snow. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something today. If you have any questions that I have not gone over, feel free to sort of ask them in the comments. I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I've gone over most things, but there are a few things that I haven't. If you have anything in particular that you'd like me to go over in a separate video or just to sort of answer questions, again, feel free to comment. And I will get back to you. Thank you very much and hope you have a great day.